Chapter 14. Tuesday, 9 a.m. Rebirth. I had fallen asleep, propped up in bed with my laptop while Larry's TV was still on. It was probably the longest night's sleep I had since leaving Witsec. When Larry knocked on the door and asked what I wanted to order for room service, I told him to surprise me. As I dragged myself to the bathroom to shower, I avoided looking in the mirror. Larry and I ate steak and eggs with pancakes, hash browns, and ketchup. When I asked what kind of beer he wanted, he said he had to drive. Not wanting to be unsociable, I stuck with coffee, adding another break in my routine. While we were eating, he got a text. I watched him peck out a reply. Lots of people ask why kids text rather than talk. I ask why boomers try to text. By the time they're finished, the world has changed. He leaned across the table and spoke in a low voice, as if Riley might hear him from the adjoining suite. I doubted it, since she probably didn't get to sleep until Larry turned off his TV, whenever that was. "They're putting us in an SDC. Just got it from an FBI buddy of mine." Since the thought of waking a fight-sore, slightly hungover, sleep-deprived Riley was frightening, I kept my voice low. "SDC? Strategic Development Center. You know, as in know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em. I'll fill you in later. Just act surprised if Riley comes in with any news." Fuck this texting. I'm going out on my balcony where I can talk. Keep an eye out for Riley. Knowing Larry, I didn't have to ask why he didn't want her to hear him good old boy it with his buddies. I retrieved my laptop, called room service, and resumed working on my project. I loved plain old-fashioned coffee, and lots of it. I didn't need exotic blends in small plastic pods that require waiting between cups. Instead, I rinsed out a 40-year-old percolator, poured the grounds into the basket, and waited for a day's worth of coffee to brew. I had come up in the world. Now I waited for the help to bring me a fresh pot. From the look on his face, the youngster who wheeled in the coffee had never seen a tip like the one I signed for, at least not for one pot of coffee. When the knock on the door was not followed by a voice announcing room service, I closed the lid on my laptop and ducked into Larry's room to throw a pillow at his patio. Then I answered the door, holding a hotel receipt. Riley gave me what I hoped was a pleasant good morning nod as she walked into our living room. With her eyes hidden by oversized sunglasses, it was hard to tell. Larry met her at the breakfast table, and without a word or nod, she handed him the receipt. She sighed and said, "You know it's going to be an awful day when it starts with 2-hour conference calls with everyone else sitting around a table somewhere. How bad? Since you didn't ask, let me tell you, Larry. It's so fucking bad that I don't even care how you two morons racked up so much for breakfast. Now, please just get the truck loaded and gassed up. I have things to do. And you guys meet me in the lobby, not the fucking bar. Am I clear? Let's just get back on the road. And I mean right now." We mumbled that she was crystal clear as she hard-shouldered me aside on her way to the door. "She'll settle down. She's not mad at us," Larry said as he poured a fresh cup and sat down. He motioned me to sit down and said, "We have a problem." As his eyes darted around the room looking for an answer, I tried to think of a problem that fell into the "we" category. I could only think of one. Let me guess. Detective, what's his name? Oh yeah, Detective Dayana. He matched my DNA to that murder he came to see us about. "Now you're worried that you took back a witness you shouldn't have," I said. He stared at me, his blue eyes confused. Then it registered, and he frowned. "No, not that. I've had to front for guys who probably robbed fucking banks on their way to get cigarettes. Serious guys, serious shit, not like you. You worry too much. Look, Dayana would have to match your DNA from stuff he already entered into evidence before coming to your house. So stop worrying. Besides, he's an asshole, but he wouldn't frame you. Trust me, that Horn guy will step on his dick before long. We all agreed the moron was an amateur. I can't believe you're worried about that. It's history," he said. "Yeah, almost 24 hours ago. My bad. What's up?" I asked, not sure why, instead of feeling relief. My feelings were hurt by the amateur remark. His eyes narrowed as if I was screwing with him by stating the obvious. Then they wandered around the room looking for the solution to the problem that was about to become partly mine because he shared it with me. I had seen this trick before. "Okay, I told you this house is an SRC, a party house. Sometimes we confiscate a place, don't sell it for some reason, and it just sits around. You have to keep it maintained and secured so it gets used for a little R&R, right? No big deal." He stopped, took a swallow of coffee, and stared out the window. "Yet there is a big deal, isn't there?" I prompted. When his eyes returned, they were no longer worried, but embarrassed. Yeah, there is. The guys are throwing me a little party. They asked if Riley was cool, and I said, sure. What else was I going to say? Then they told me to expect a little surprise. I say, hey, there's cool and then there's cool. Henry says, no problem, it's a big place, we'll keep her occupied. I barely choked off my response in time as his eyes went past worry to panic. I had traveled with the guy and had rooms on the same hotel floor. Larry wasn't shy. He liked women, and the women we met in the corner bars liked him. I couldn't help but wonder for a moment if the whole broke-back cowboy business hadn't struck home. Then it hit me. Riley. That left me with no response. Verbal, anyway. I went with the old tried-and-true eyebrow raise. He returned it and added a headshake. Yeah, pathetic, huh? I mean, sure, I get what I see in her. Hell, every guy who sees her can't take his fucking eyes off her. I mean, look at her. And she's smart. Trust me, brother, she'll never have a partner she doesn't get to, he said. He took a long swallow of coffee and flinched as it burned his throat. Embarrassed, he looked out to the patio and waited until he could talk. I have over 20 years on her. Even if I didn't, she'd still be way out of my league, he finished. He had it bad. First, the every guy who sees her was slightly exaggerated. Second, not all guys or women go for the don't fuck with me type. He stood and patted me on the back when he finished his coffee. Thanks, brother. I owe you, he said, and went into his bedroom to start packing, not bothering to explain or give me a chance to ask what he thanked me for. We followed Riley's instructions to the letter and waited for her in the lobby. Because I had elected to sleep instead of code, I was behind schedule on my little project. I was heads down and light years away when a large manila envelope landed on my keyboard. Your next life for the next few months. You need to study it on the drive there. It's not the usual, more of a concept since they couldn't be... Never mind, there wasn't time. Study it, and tomorrow morning a coordinator from the FBI will come for a visit and go over everything. Be ready, she said, in a tight, quiet voice. Didn't your parents tell you it's not polite to eavesdrop? Get the fuck out of here. She hissed at the kid buried sideways in a chair across from us. She pulled aside her jacket to show the badge and gun, and eyes wide, he got the fuck out of there, his little fingers flying on his cell. FBI? What the hell? Since when does the FBI get into our shit? Larry snapped. Not here, deputy. Excuse me, contract deputy. We can discuss it in the car, Riley said, and walked away. But we didn't discuss it in the car. Not for the next 100 miles. Riley broke the cold silence by turning in the front seat to look at me. What are you working on? Your last will and testament? Larry, stay in the right lane. We don't want him bouncing out in the middle of the highway, she said, her voice dripping venom. She lowered her sunglasses, and I winced. You learn something about black eyes growing up in a trailer park. This one had legs. It wasn't going away soon. Now, what the fuck do you think you were doing? And fuck that hobby shit. I could see Larry's eyes in the rearview mirror. They were marble hard and looked straight ahead. I was on my own. Okay, it's a game I'm working on. I'm allowed to make a living, remember? What's the game? Let me guess. Backseat driver? Oh, for fuck's sake, Riley, come on, Larry said. They glared at one another until Larry was forced to return us to our lane by a semi-truck's blaring horn. Having decided to try to live for as long as possible, I intervened and pulled my game project code. Professional programmers would find a real game if they hacked into the code. They would also discover connections to AI agents in the cloud they couldn't access. And every single one of them would swear it was just a cover for something else, because of how carefully every file name began with the game. More suspicious, every code file was exhaustively documented. Programmers working on real projects with deadlines spend as little time as possible on documenting code. I turned the laptop around and showed Riley a development environment that screamed, even to someone who didn't program, this is a game. It doesn't have a name yet. Basically, the players try to hack into each other's computers, I said. It worked. Riley's head snapped around so quickly that she almost gouged out her good eye with the thick temple of her sunglasses. Larry's eyes darted back and forth between looking at the road and me in the rearview mirror. Not their actual computers, just virtual computers the game sets up on their machines, called VMs, I quickly said. Yes, I know what virtual machines are. You're teaching people how to hack? And programming it while sitting behind federal agents? Riley asked. She probably thought both her eyes were sending the same message. They weren't. The good eye was cold and measured, the other simply demonic. Welcome to my world, I thought. No, the game teaches people how hacking used to be done. How it's shown on TV. You know, somebody glued to a screen as shit races down a screen. And honestly, it was never that way. So yeah, they learn how to hack and what happens when you get caught. Mostly, they learn about the basics of protecting a computer, I said. What happens when they get caught? Larry asked. They go into a game timeout, their hack is exposed, and the other players get to mock them. It gets longer every time they're caught. You get back your health by catching other hackers, I said. Riley nodded to herself and turned around, leaving me to work on real code with a real deadline. I put my earbuds in place to discourage more conversation. Since I had never discussed the idea with Larry, he added me to his shit list of passengers and cranked up the air conditioning. It was another trick of his I had seen before. The bastard could walk barefoot in a blizzard. If I said anything, he would sigh, comment about how I always talked about being Wyoming tough and turn it down 1/10 of a degree. 100 miles later, as I wondered how to scrape the frost off my laptop screen, Riley reached into her bag and lit a cigarette and blew smoke into Larry's face. Take the off-ramp up ahead. I have a call to make, she ordered. The off-ramp led to a 2-lane state road cutting across ranch land of brown grass and small groves of trees. A windbreak of poplars protecting a house was about a mile down the road. Riley stepped into the blazing sun and lifted her face. I started to get out. Larry shook his head, and I settled for rolling down the window to let winter out and summer in. I didn't know she smoked, I said. She gave it up. We both thought she was faking the call. But Larry's smug grin disappeared when she looked like she would throw the phone into the field. Instead, she stalked over to the ditch filled with weeds alongside the road. She stopped, looked down at a beer can, and smashed it flat with 2 vicious stomps. Then she kicked it into the weeds. A working cat, out hunting birds instead of rats, bolted out of the weeds. It stopped a few yards into the field, turned and looked at Riley. Riley's hand edged toward her holster. Larry turned to face me and said, Hey, I think I know how to solve my problem. Larry, I think she's going to shoot that cat. He glanced over at her, then looked back at me. Probably. It's what got her on the protection side. I couldn't take my eyes off of the woman and cat. Both faced each other almost motionless, just as the old Western gunfighters did, except the cat wasn't packing. They assign people who shoot people to WITSEC? You never told me that, I whispered. No, you get assigned to WITSEC if you keep shooting the fugitives instead of bringing them in, he said as he followed my eyes. Riley's gun was almost out of the holster. Man, isn't she something? He said softly. Before I could answer, he turned back to me and said in a hurried whisper, Now, fucking pay attention. I know how to solve my problem. I'll give you my surprise tonight. Yep, trust me, the guys will be all over it. And I can tell, brother, you're finally ready. Hell, way past ready. I looked into his eyes and realized he was right. So right. I wished Riley would shoot the fucking cat so we could get back on the road. She held her Glock alongside her leg. The cat cocked its head. Why would she shoot a cat? I asked. She has a thing for wild birds, Larry replied. Riley slid her weapon into its holster and stamped her foot at the killer. The killer wasn't impressed. Riley's hand returned to the holster. She shook her head angrily, then slowly turned and headed back.